Hello distinction students, welcome to my online commerce class. This is your tutor Miss Zulu. In today's lesson we're looking at contracts. Well, we're going to define what a contract is, classifications of a contract and the different types of a contract. But before I get into that, remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more sessions. So what is a contract? A contract is a legally binding or valid agreement between parties. A contract can also be defined as a legally exchange of promise or agreement between parties that the law will enforce. So let's look at what an invitation of treat is. So an invitation of treat is merely an invitation for customers to submit an offer. Parties of a contract. An offer is an expression of willingness to contract on certain terms with intentions that as soon as it is accepted, it becomes binding. Now let's look at how a contract is made. So the formation of a contract begins with an offer. So let me say, for instance, there's an offer of money in exchange of goods, or an offer of services in exchange for other services, or even the promise of a future payment, right, of the money in exchange of a service that has been delivered. So the other point is an offer must be communicated to the party. Someone will not be treated in law as having accepted an offer if they do not know about it. The other point, if the other party wishes to, they must clearly accept the offer, providing the basis of formal agreement. The other party can refuse the offer or make a counter offer, which is common in commercial negotiations. Now we look at the elements of a valid contract. So the first one is acceptancy. Acceptancy is the final and unqualified expression of assent to the two terms of an offer. It must be communicated. So signing a contract is one way a party shows he or she has assented to it. To assent is simply to agree or to approve to something. So in order for a contract to be formed, the parties must reach a mutual assent. An offer can be made to an individual, a group of people, and the entire world. Now we look at consideration. It is a price paid for the promise of another party. It may be some rights, interest, or benefits going to one party, loss or responsibility given, suffered or undertaken by the other party. The other one, as long as consideration exists, the court will not question its adequacy provided that it is of some value, right? It must not be illegal or impossible to perform. Legal capacity. This is the legal ability to enter into a contract, right? Not all people are completely free to enter in a valid contract. The following have no capacity to enter in a contract: people with mental impairment, minors, bankrupts, or prisoners. So this point simply says you cannot get into a contract with somebody who's mentally disturbed, right? Or somebody who's very young. Or let me say somebody who's got money issues, or a prisoner, right? You cannot get in a contract with such people. Now we look at certainty. Entering into a contract must involve the elements of free will and proper understanding of what each of the parties is doing. So the consent of each of the parties to the contract must be genuine, right? All the essential terms to be settled between the parties must be settled. It must be clear as to what the parties have agreed upon. Now we look at the importance of a contract. So the first point is contracts serve as a record of rights, responsibilities, and obligations. So what do I mean? An effective contract will describe in details what duties each party has to another, right? Before you sign that contract, you need to know what duties will be performed, right? The second point is contracts make private premises legally enforceable. What do I mean? So the intention is to be legally bound to one another, right? And it requires that for a contract to exist, it must be enforceable, or it must be enforced by the law, which this should be done by both parties, right? The other one that we'll look at is contracts formalize a relationship between parties. So before the contract, before you begin the process of a contract, right, the parties that want to have that agreement have to come together with a mutual understanding or a mutual benefit, right? So before the contract is formalized, there has to be a relationship between those two parties or those two businesses that are going or getting into that contract. The other one is contracts ensure that you get paid. So when you get a contract, when you sign a contract or that agreement, you are assured to say you are going to get paid, right? And then contracts provide an opportunity to increase revenue. So when you talk about contracts provide an increase to revenue, meaning it's possible for these two parties to negotiate at any point where they will increase the pay or they will increase the terms of the revenue, right? So that way the contract will become more efficient or more sufficient. The other one is contracts prevent disputes between two parties. So when we talk about signing a contract, signing an agreement, meaning whatever disputes will come in the future will not be considered because both parties or both businesses came up with an agreement which was written down and which was signed between the two or between those companies, right? When you talk about the other one, which is contracts guarantee confidentiality, what do I mean? Meaning they have signed, there are sensitive matters in their contracts, right? Meaning both parties have agreed to make that contract private, to make that contract between them and not going to other people, right? That's an agreement that they make. So now we look at classification of contracts. So the first one is contracts are broadly classified into 3 different categories as follows. So the first one is contracts based on validity or legal effects. So these contracts are based on legal implementation fall in this category of contracts. So when you talk about contracts that are based on performance or execution, the signing parties perform their duties based on the contractual agreement, and contract execution is the process that defines it. The last one is contracts based on information or mode of creation. When a contract is created, various aspects are taken into consideration, whether it is written contract or not. Now we look at the different types of contracts. So the first type of a contract that we are going to look at is the employment contract. So the employment contract is an agreement between a worker and an employer where the employer promises to pay the workers for specific work that the worker promises to do. So when you talk about an employment contract, it involves two parties. It involves the employer, who is the business, or maybe I should say the person who hires workers to do a specific job. Then when you talk about the employee, simply that's a worker who has been hired to do that job. So mostly if we talk about the information that is found in these employment contracts, you'll find information like the type of job and the position for the employee. You'll find the tasks or the responsibilities the worker is supposed to do. There'll be details about the salary and other information, right? The other type of contract we're going to look at is an insurance contract. So it is an agreement between the business that needs insurance and the insurance company. So here there are two parties involved. We have the insurer, the insurance company that promises to cover the insured against any losses specified in the insurance contract. Then the insured, the business that needs insurance against losses. So when we talk about an insurance company that offers an insurance contract, it has two types of insurance contracts. We have the first contract, which is called the short-term insurance contract. So when we talk of the short-term insurance contract, it covers any losses of assets due to accidents, damages, or crime. That is a short-term insurance contract. When we look at the long-term insurance contract, it insures the lives of important people in the business, right? So let's say this important person in the business dies. The money will be paid out by the insurance company to cover the financial losses, or if that person owed anybody money, the insurance contract company will come in and pay off those debts. Now we look at the other agreement contracts that we have. So we have a lease agreement contract. So when you talk about a lease agreement contract, it is where one business leases goods to another business, right? So the other one that we'll look at is the hire purchase agreement contract. When you talk about the hire purchase agreement contract, it is a transaction where a business sells goods to another, or if a business allows them to take their goods, right, and then pay them in installments. So when you talk about this contract, meaning you have agreed to get goods and pay them in installments, right? So in here, the two parties that are involved, we have the seller and we have the buyer. So who is the seller? The seller is the business that is selling goods to another person, right? And then when we talk about the buyer, this is a business or a person buying goods from another business and promises to pay back for the goods over a specific period of time in installment, right? So the other one that we'll look at is rental agreement contract. When we talk about a rental agreement contract, this is where a business or a person cannot afford to buy their own land or build their own shop, but instead they will rent somebody else's property. So when we talk about this agreement, we have two parties involved. We have a landlord and we have a tenant. So the landlord is the owner of the land, right? Then when we talk about the tenant is the one that's, or the person or maybe the business that pays the rent. Now we look at the advantages of a contract. So when you talk about the advantages of a contract, we have one, hire take home pay. So when you talk about hire take home pay, it means everybody who signs a contract is assured to earn their money while staying on the right side. What do I mean on the right side? Meaning you have signed a contract and you are assured to get a specific amount of money at the end of that contract, right? Then the other one is tax relief on business. The other one is opportunity of clear set expectation. So you and the person that you signed an agreement with, you have clear expectation because that contract is clear and it's written and both parties have come to terms that, okay, I agreed to this, and both parties have signed. So there are clear expectations. When we talk about the disadvantages, we say there is less flexibility. What do I mean? So there are other restrictions, right? So before the termination of that contract, you might have to put other terms in place, right? But because you have already signed that contract, there are restrictions, and that might affect the future, right? Because that contract has already been signed, and you as an employee have certain duties that you have agreed to perform to. Then when we talk about it takes time. So writing a contract takes time. and it might lead to delays and confusion between both parties, right? Thank you for watching my session. Remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more sessions.